Justin Mayers is the founder of multiple health companies, including Kettle and Fire, Perfect Keto, and TrueMed, as well as a good friend of mine for many years. We chat about how his networking helped make him 8 figures, why he thinks the FDA has killed more Americans than any other governmental agency, and we catch up on our beliefs about God, happiness, and life. You asked me if I was an atheist.
Yeah, but still an atheist.
No, I don't think so. God, what am I?
Because when we met, you were an extremely hardcore atheist.
I had literal chapters of my book written, and then Sam Harris snaked me. He beat me to it. Him and Christopher Hitchens. I was like, this doesn't need to be done. What are you? I'm nervous to talk about it, honestly.
Great.
Where are you right now?
I would say that I am currently confused.
Okay.
And I've been describing this to friends as I used to be very religious. I thought I was going to be a priest until I was like 17 or so. And then at some point in college, a friend killed himself, put me on this like path. And I was like, why could this happen? And became like a pretty serious atheist. And then at some point, really in the last couple of years, something has shifted back, and I don't know what it is, where I feel like this emotional and kind of like emotional, spiritual like tug in a sense. And it's very weird because I would say emotionally and spiritually, I feel like religious, and intellectually, I'm like not there yet at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to reconcile those two things. Or if they just will get reconciled for me.
Totally. I think the number of like religious experiences that I've had is maybe approaching double digits, but every time that intellectual part comes back in and goes, no hallucination, no imagination, math doesn't check out here.
Totally.
If I look back on it, I thought that my atheism was intellectually based, and I don't think it was. I actually think it is. So my dog died a couple months ago, and when that happened, it was really sad, obviously. And I was in the parking lot after putting her down, and I was so upset, and I let myself sink into the upset, and it was like the question that came up was, why does God hate me? And it was a deep question, like clearly not the first time some part of me had asked that question.
Whoa.
Yeah. And yeah, God, that was fucking painful. And it illuminated the fact that my atheism, the cognitive part of it came second, and the emotional part of it came first, which is like kind of like you described with your friend, which is this ain't it. Like this loving man in the sky that wants the best for me, and then this fucking truck of shit hits me. But yeah, man, after that, a couple of things have been happening. So I don't know what I am right now, but I've had a couple of experiences. A lot of them are on psychedelics, and I keep getting the instinct that says something like, allow yourself to kneel. And I have a hyper resistance to kneeling, like physically and emotionally. The posture of like bowing my head before anything feels, as I feel into it, and I've allowed myself to like assume the kneeling position before, it feels like I'm going to get hurt. It feels if I bow my head before whatever, that it's going to take my head off. And on the few occasions that I've allowed myself to kneel, I have had what you could describe as spiritual or religious experiences of, it's like only when you kneel do you recognize the enormity of what is in front of you, or at least that's been my experience. Yeah, and I find myself wanting to, I've had the instinct to kneel before a number of the relationships in my life, like not in the subservient, you're my master kind of way, but I guess what you could call like the divinity within the relationship feels like it's asking to be recognized. And if I don't assume a posture emotionally, not like I have to like bow down and kiss my girlfriend's feet or anything, but of kneeling, when I assume that posture, I see it in a completely different light. And I see the gifts and the blessings and like all of that stuff comes through in a major way. So yeah, I don't know about that. The other thing, have you been interested in the story of Jesus?
I mean, I grew up very religious, so I know it quite well.
Does it resonate with you?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah.
So I was familiar with the stories, but some of them have just been like, I've felt them deeply.
Really?
Yes.
Like which ones?
Gethsemane, hits me fucking hard. I feel like I've had a spiritual phase of Gethsemane, which is, there's a couple things that he say that have brought me to tears on a number of occasions. I was like, where did I read this? I didn't even know. Like, but he's like, if this is not meant for me, please let this pass me over, as he's waiting. And it's like, no, this is yours, what's coming. And I have felt that. I think I have felt that I am about to take up my cross, if that makes a sense. And there's going to be a death of some kind, of the egoic me, of the, I'm going to cry. It hits me fucking heavy. And I've been terrified of that, and I don't want to. And I've resisted it in every way, but I've felt it coming.
Yeah.
And I feel myself emotionally, it feels kind of like at the foot of the thing where the cross is there, and it's like, this is yours. And walk with it. And I've had a number of the whole walk. Oh my God, the things that he says, why have you forsaken me? The viewing of that situation as almost any human would view it, like, you don't love me.
Yeah.
How could you allow this to happen to me? And what I've broken through to on a handful of occasions is it feels like the making of a king, that story. And I have felt the cross is a throne. And it feels like, to me, what I spiritually get out of it is that Jesus is being asked to carry his throne to the top of the hill where he can become king. And it fucking sucks. And it's like the way there is through the death of who you were, or at least that's how I take it. And all of the crown of thorns, which like just bites into his skull and hurts, is transformed into a crown at the top. Yeah, and it resonates with me. It's that there's a part of me that is going to have to die, and I am terrified of that.
Yeah.
So whether I believe in God is, I connect deeply with the stories of Jesus, and have been terrified regularly.
I mean, that definitely resonates. Like in almost every sense. I think I look around at my life and I'm like, happy with it. And it's like, there's so many elements that I've like worked hard to build. And it's like, I want to hold on to these elements. I've worked so hard for this, in many ways. I've been working, I guess we've known each other for a decade now. Like since we met, I've been like trying to like work on starting stuff, doing well, like all these sorts of things. And in many ways, I feel very, very afraid that any sort of like leaning hard into a spiritual path or religion or whatever it is, or getting sucked into it, whatever, whatever the future may hold, will require like giving up a lot of stuff that I've worked really hard for. And like that is fucking scary.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you feel that at all with you just got married, with your relationship, or when you think about kids? Because for me, that's what brings it up. It's like, for me, and you see it, you don't have it probably as heavy as I do, but there's a pretty egoic, selfish version of me that exists as single Charlie. And I have not completely allowed that part to die, even in relationship.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I feel is like that level of default selfishness is going, not have to, it will die.
Yeah.
And I think a kid is a big thing that scares me. It's like that is going to shatter that, whether I want it to or not. And I'm wondering if that brings it up for you, or if it's more around.
Yeah. What's funny is it doesn't actually bring that up for me around kids at all. And one of the big reasons, I think, is that literally 100% of the people that I respect, who I look at 10, 20, 30 years ahead of me, all of them are like, you should definitely have kids. You should do it sooner. It's like the best. It's hard. It's challenging. It's like, trying all these things can be tough on a relationship. But having talked to friends about this and mentors about this, all of them are like, it's not like a part of you died. It's like you got excited about this new direction and you just like cast off this old, like the old stuff that's just not serving you.
And it was easy. Yeah.
And it was not even easy. It was like joyous in a sense. You know what I mean? And I think that there are very, 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 very few things in the world that can cause someone to like change in such a drastic way and do it with joy, as opposed to like fear and grasping and all these things. And I think kids are like one of the few things.
And you feel that'll click on for you?
I think so.
I have fear that it won't click on for me is another thing. A deep knowing that it will. Yeah, a deep knowing that it will, but a fear that it won't.
Totally.
You said mentors. I just thought of this. I am realizing I've been like bereft of mentors in my life. My mentors have been Tim Ferriss or the guy that I read in the book, people that I've never met before.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back to like literally the first time we met, you had a mentor and he was rich and you would stay in his house and he would get, and you are probably of people anywhere near my age, you're younger than me. Like you're the most financially successful by far. Congratulations. Has that been critical, those mentors?
100%.
Yeah, that's a fucking swing and a miss for me right there.
I mean, you can still get, you can still do it.
I've been starting to. How have you done that? Because like I don't bump into 45-year-olds, like regularly.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
I didn't either. I mean, so something I would say on mentors is I think that the weirder the life that you want, the harder it is to get mentors from like an in-person standpoint. And my sense for you, and maybe this, I don't know if this is or is not true, but my sense for you is that you very quickly wanted a like weird outlier life. And I think that it would have been really hard for you to find a mentor that you could actually hang out with in person. You know what I mean? For me, there's like, when I was 21, 22 into the startup stuff, I was in school in Pittsburgh. There were people doing startups in Pittsburgh. I moved to San Francisco, hung out with, made a couple mentors and connections there. And like the entire city is oriented around, building wealth and creating companies and like knowing how to do that, specific thing.
Yeah, it was like a path that people had seen and done.
Yeah, completely. And so I do think that there, like in Elon's biography, he kind of mentioned at one point that he had a bunch of mentors. They were just like biographies of older people. Like Rockefeller and Carnegie and a bunch of all these people. And so I do think that that's a thing. That said, I was really, really intentional about getting mentors. I think that, no value judgment here, but I didn't come from money. I didn't come from a connected family. I didn't come from any of that. And so for me, I had to like kind of grind to like meet a bunch of mentors. Like the dude that, Jonathan, that you're referring to. I met him because I was in San Francisco doing an internship, and I set a goal of myself to send like 5 cold emails a day to people that I thought were like just in startups doing interesting shit. And one of them agreed to meet me for coffee. I went to his office for coffee, took the bus, took like, an hour. I had no money at the time. Met him at the office for coffee. His office outside had like a 3D printer, and I was into 3D printing at that point. And so I was like, started talking to this other dude who was there just about the 3D printer. And he was like, oh, I'm getting a 3D printer for my son. I was like, I can answer questions about that, whatever. That guy was Jonathan. We ended up working together for years. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so it's like this, for me.
You were very open and seeking that.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it was an openness. I'd say it was like, I was like hungry and like looking to build relationships.
Did you have a sense in that first conversation that this was?
No, definitely not.
Wow.
Yeah. I just followed up, and like my follow-up was good. My entire life at that point was, how do I build relationships with smart people that I can learn from? And like before I did that before that summer in San Francisco, I was in Pittsburgh and I took out, I went to coffee with a stranger 4 or 5 times a week that was working in startups because I was like extremely awkward socially. And so I wanted to get better at that, you know? So I made it like a very intentional, these people, like if you are a person that's doing interesting shit, I want to find you and learn from you. Yeah. I was very aggressive about it.
You've also done like, you have a ton of friends. Like you had a big summer camp thing with like 100+ people at it.
Yeah.
How do you do all that?
A lot of that, I mean, that was entirely Janine, my wife. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's crazy.
Yeah. No, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. I do think I have a lot of friends. A lot of it is we do a lot of stuff in community, but this is actually an area that I have to give huge props to Janine. This is not a thing that I was naturally good at.
Has she brought a lot of like either emotionally powerful connections to you or just like business powerful connections?
Emotionally powerful, yeah. Some business. You know what's funny though? I almost don't think of any, I don't like delineate between like business and other connections at this point. Like I have friends that I'll do business and stuff with. But I think for probably 2 or 3 years, I've been extremely not looking at people through the lens of like, can this individual help me from a business standpoint?
Yes, and it seems like you are just so fascinated by what you're doing that
100%.
Inevitably those tracks are going to run close together.
Yeah.
You're like deeply interested in the work that you're doing, and you're going to be bored by someone who isn't, probably. Right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I look around and most of my friends are founders, or it's like this is not like I'm hanging out with Joe Schmo all the time. It's more just like I am friends with someone like a JD or others, not because they're.
What's a JD?
Oh, JD is like a friend.
Okay.
He just first friend that popped to mind. We both know Dylan and Scott. Like, I'm not friends with these guys because they're founders, but I just think people that are interested in new weird shit tend to also be the types of people that like start things that they find are interesting. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're the same way. You're a very outlier person, and you've started a lot of shit now.
Yes. The thing that is different with me is that I realize I've done a bad job at having loose connections. Like, either you want to be my friend 7 days a week and we hang out all the time, or like I haven't seen you in forever, and I'm not good at those that check-in call every couple of months, or like, fuck it, I got to get to Austin. I know so many people in Austin I should go visit, which is why I'm here. Do you make a conscious effort to do that stuff, or?
Yeah, and I'm trying to get better at this. Even.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm like decent at it, and I want to actually become world-class at it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The value is there, you think?
100%. Mm-hmm. And I just think it makes life interesting. Like if you have a connection, like a deep connection, or someone that you would really enjoy spending time with, it's way nicer to have some light touches with that person so that both of you feel in some time in the future like, oh, I should hang out with this person or re-engage. Like I have a bunch of friends that if we ever happen to live in the same city at some point in the future, like I know that we're going to be great friends and it's going to make my life better. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're like set in LA forever, and so that feels like less of a thing.
Yeah. Do you have like a system where you're like a spreadsheet of anything, or is it?
No, but I'm working on building one.
Yeah. How did I know you do shout outs, and you had like how did that work? You had an email that was mostly for friends, a friend newsletter, and you would say what was going on. I always enjoyed reading it.
Yeah. That's one of the things I'm going to do again.
I got shouted out once. That was fucking epic. And, yeah, it was. How did that go? At the bottom of it, you would have in the small print, like cool things
Kudos.
people have done, and
totally.
there would be 12 people that had done, sold his business, or thanks for cooking dinner with me on Thursday. Like,
totally.
That was How did that work out for you?
It was awesome.
I imagine, because
everyone said they loved it,
bro.
Yeah,
I felt something about They were like monthly updates, was it?
Yeah, and it was like more quarterly.
Okay, quarterly.
But yes, in theory, it was supposed to be monthly updates. And then about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I just kind of stopped.
Yeah,
and I need to. It's something. A big goal of mine this quarter is to like build infrastructure around like friendships, relationships, all this kind of stuff. And
did people like reply directly to that,
all the time.
And you would reconnect?
Yeah, all the time.
Crazy.
Or the crazy thing too was it just kind of keeps you top of mind for people. And so there would be people that I haven't like talked to in forever, but that were friends. We had a great connection. We like had a period where we hung out, and I would get random texts out of the blue that are like, "Hey, what protein powder? Good to hear from you, but like I read this thing you're writing about protein powder. Like, what do you think I should do?" Or, "Hey, I'm like thinking of this thing. Like, what are your thoughts?" And it just created a much larger surface area over which people could reach out and connect with me. That I'm really grateful for,
dude. That's so funny. I mean, the podcast has been a miniature version of that. I get more reach outs from this podcast with 1/1000th of the viewership of Charisma on Command because my friends would watch the podcast. Yeah. Like I've heard from you, I don't know how many times about the podcast.
Totally.
Like never about Charisma on Command. That's so, we used to Let's Duo together. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
It was a program.
That was a great product.
It was a product where you would journal, and it would tell your friend that they had just journaled, and you could read their journal entry and you could journal entry back. And it was just telling what was going on in your life.
Yeah.
Interesting. I probably should do this. How did you build that? You've got the list now, but like, what do I do? Like ask my friends to sign up?
I just sent one and I put people on it. And
any email you have, if you want to unsubscribe.
100%. And at the bottom, I said, look, if you want to unsubscribe, do it. I will be 0% offended. Yeah. I get too much email too. I'm doing this for me. And if you don't want it, that's totally fine.
Dude, but it was like a bright spot, I think, of everybody's email.
I got so much positive feedback from that. I don't know why. I know why I stopped doing it. I was like afraid of, you know, even just like sharing that vulnerably in some ways, like made me a little afraid at times, but I'm picking it back up again.
That's a powerful thing. I think, like, I'm just thinking of stealing that from you. If you put that in a product and you like make people do it and you hold them accountable to do it, their life would probably improve very quickly.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that one of the sad things about that almost everyone has, that's kind of sad, is no one understands how many people they have in their lives that are like truly rooting for them and in their corner all the time.
Quietly,
totally. Like there are people in my life that if they texted, emailed, whatever, and said, yo, I need help with this, I would drop everything to like,
I feel the same
help
way.
them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet most of those people probably don't know that. And like, maybe that's on me to be more explicit and choose like 10 people in the world to, you know, that I think are doing amazing shit, and just be like, yo, I want to be clear. If you ever need anything, I've got you, you know?
People love to help, I think. No, okay, that's too broad. When you have a positive feeling towards someone and you are given the opportunity to help in an area that you have like leverage or expertise, it is a good feeling that comes up. Yeah. You would call me for charisma questions. It was just like,
totally.
That's not a take.
Yeah.
That's a nice thing.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I call you for investing stuff, and I hope that's not it.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help, you know?
Interesting.
And I have like a friend who has this concept where he was like, I like want to think about having, like Gimli style from Lord of the Rings, like, and my axe, like I want to like have like 10 axes that I get over the course of my life. Like if you have my axe, like whatever you fucking need, like let me know.
And you hand out a physical axe, and it's like, as long as you can produce a photo of this axe, it's an NFT. It can get passed from person to person to person.
Yeah. He was like, I think I'm going to make this and literally hand it to like 10 people in my life. And I was like, that's so cool.
That's fucking epic.
I love that.
And my ox. I like it. I have to ask, because I am curious. The TrueMed stuff. What a friend of ours asked. He's like, I want to know one level deeper. I get that Justin's interested in health stuff. Why? Like, why
am I
health
interested
stuff?
in health?
Yeah. So we could. You've got a number of businesses. You've got Kettle and Fire. I'll do a little intro that explains what you've been up to, so that people can understand. But like, why? You can do anything right now.
Yeah.
You clearly don't like storytelling. We talked about that last night. You don't want to do entertainment. Like, why health?
Yeah. I think that I've always been extremely intellectually curious and like drawn towards areas that I think people have bad or like misinformed opinions on. Like I'm really interested in like heterodox things. And so have you heard like the Peter Thiel, like every great startup is built on like a secret sort of thing?
I think I can imagine. Yeah. It's like, what is the thing that you believe?
That everyone else, that no one else does, or very few people do. And as I basically got turned on to health when I was like, after my friend committed suicide in college, I went through this period where I was depressed for effectively the first time in my life. I grew up 7 kids, one of 7, like was always around people. I knew all of them. It was very deep. Then I was off to college, broke up with my girlfriend, friend committed suicide. Like it was just in a novel environment, was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it was cloudy all the time. I was like not outside for the first time. Yeah. And all these things kind of happened. And I was like, fuck, how do I like dig out of this depression? And one of the few things that worked was like working out. And so I first started like lightly working out, and then I started reading about, like you can do diet to work out here. And then as I got more and more, I just started reading about like diet and its impact on health, and that impacted your emotional health and how you felt about yourself and all this stuff.
So it's the internal feeling. Yeah. Because for you, that was the thing that slipped.
Yeah, I think so. And then I also grew up, I was in college eating a super, super standard like American college kid diet of pasta, pizza, and beer. And I went paleo for a couple weeks at one point. All my friends thought I was crazy. They're like, wait, you're not drinking beer or eating pizza? Like,
this was like early.
This is 2011.
Yeah.
And so I tried it for 3 weeks and my skin cleared up. I lost some body fat. I felt better. I was like, had more energy. And I was just like, wow, this is so crazy. Like, this is insane. I'd been seeing, I've been like trying a bunch of like therapy and therapy oriented things that the college provided to work through, some of the depression, and like changing my diet made me feel better than anything that the therapist had done.
That's fascinating. And not that, because I think my approach, probably just because a different order of breakthrough, is a little bit more internally focused. And it's always interesting to talk to you because you're like, how are we designing our environments so that they're supporting?
Yeah.
And that's a piece that I have not paid as much attention to. And it makes sense that, if your first breakthrough is like around that piece, that's going to stick with you.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then from there, I felt like I knew this thing to be true, which was like being healthy means that you feel better. And everyone around me, I was like, and I still think it's gotten worse since 2012 when I graduated. Everyone in the US is like sick and getting sicker. And I look around and I just can't help but look at the fact that, 73 or 74% of the country is overweight. Almost 50% of Americans are obese.
Really? 50.
50. It's close to 30% for kids under the age of 18, which is insane. We've never had like overweight kids or obese kids in history before. And I just can't help but think that when you look at charts around physical health, like chronic illness going through the roof, obesity, overweight going through the roof, all this stuff, they're also comorbid, meaning like they occur at the same time as the rise in like ADHD, anxiety, all these sorts of things. And I basically, at this point, strongly believe that it is impossible to have a healthy human and a healthy country made up of sick, physically sick people. And I think that, to me, our environment is poisoning us, and our food system is making us sick. And that, to me, is just like, why is this happening? How do you fix it? And what can I potentially do about that as an individual is the most interesting question that I am aware of literally in the world.
Yeah. That the food input is crazy. It's almost like, it's like the water. Because for me, it's, what are the big interventions I can make? It's like, fuck, I have to eat 3 times a day, every single day.
Totally.
And I guess I broke through a little bit early with just not for health reasons, but for aesthetic, I want girls to like me reasons. I started eating generally clean enough food that it wasn't dragging my health through the mud.
And you're healthy.
Yeah. Enough.
Yeah.
You said, you had a blog post, I thought, you think, I got to check on this, that the FDA is responsible for more American deaths than any other agency. Do you include the Department of Defense in there?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a bold claim.
Yes.
Elaborate.
I think that if you look, the FDA has taken almost the exact wrong approach when it comes to like regulating. When it comes to a food system and like chemical toxicant in our food system, in our water, and all these sorts of things, the FDA takes the approach of they basically treat anything that is novel to humans that is in our food, water, whatever systems as okay, as long as the manufacturer of that thing has run like one study that says like it's probably not harmful. As you can imagine, these studies are horrible. And this is how like things like trans fats, BPA, all of these things that we know are like carcinogenic, just bad for people. In the case of trans fats, have probably killed literally millions of people. This is how all these things have ended up in our food system forever.
Yeah.
On top of that,
and you believe, so I want to pause for a second.
Yeah.
Do you believe that those companies / the people at those companies, how blind an eye did they turn? Did they know that stuff was bad, or was it just in their interest not to look?
I think that it was mostly in their interest not to look.
That's what I see, because I actually know people that have big businesses with like 5 syllable stuff in their things, and it's like, well, there's no sugar, and it's
totally.
You invented a new compound that hasn't been tested, that is X long, and in 20 years is going to be poison, and you have every reason not to think that because
of course.
No one's shoving it in your face.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I'm biased in a different direction, right? Like maybe it comes out that that it wasn't our food system, but it's like some weird chemical compound that's making everyone overweight and having chronic disease, and it's like in the water, and it turns out your diet didn't matter at all. I'm super biased to avoid that piece of information if it were to come through. I try not to be, but well, it's factual.
You started with a clean slate and have built an edifice. So I trust the way you've arrived there. It's not crazy.
But I do think though that there are some bad actors in like, have you seen Empire of Pain or read Empire of Pain? It's about the Sackler family around all of the opioid crisis and everything like that. I think that broadly, these companies are like run, mostly good people work at these companies. I think though that for a lot of these major companies, you are at the high levels, you are almost selecting for like psychopaths in some ways. And if you look at or watch Empire of Pain, I can't remember if that's the name of the book or the documentary, but you can't help but look at that and you go, oh, these people knew, and they are evil as fuck. And I think that there are documented cases of like 3M just had the largest settlement, non-pharmaceutical settlement, non-tobacco settlement around this class of chemicals called PFAS. It was like a $10 or $13 billion settlement where they basically knew that these compounds that were in like Teflon and like a bunch of other shit that they use are cancer causing. They're bioaccumulative and they're like definitively causing a bunch of harm. They're a bunch of streams, air, everything. And that's
so there are individuals that are just,
And that is why you are seeing huge settlements. Like tobacco didn't, it wasn't like a bunch of innocent people working at Philip Morris making cigarettes and everyone's like gobsmacked when they get cancer and they get a $200 whatever billion settlement. It's like they knew and they actively try and suppress it.
And they did math, said, look, we can keep this gravy train going. Got it.
And what's kind of fucked up is like the math probably works. If you're 3M,
of course.
You're making $1 billion in profit a year and you go, okay, $10 billion settlement. We can keep this gravy train going 20 more years. Like, let's do it.
Do you know Daniel Schmachtenberger's work?
I know of him. I don't follow him super closely.
He talks about how basically, and like I've heard critiques of capitalism that I think are from beneath, meaning like there's resentment and envy driving this. I feel like he gives a critique of it that is from above, which is like the structure of capitalism. Even he talks about money. I'll give you the brief on money because I'm going to fuck it up. It's that things in the world are, non-fungible or fungible? They're fungible, meaning like a tree cannot be exchanged for a goat, like in the world. Like the value of a tree is in its treeness. Non-fungible. Yeah. Okay. Money is fungible, which is like $1 can be made hundreds, can be into ones and all of that. And so when you're working with stuff in a barter system, there's X amount of trees you want to cut down because you got to store them, you got to do this. There's only so much value. But when you change it over to a monetary system, you're now incentivized to cut down every single tree because you can turn it to money, which is maximum optionality for the future. And you add the dynamic of like the thing that you need to do, the most important thing is defense and war, because if you could just take somebody else's trees, you know what I mean? So it always insists on a game where the person who can exploit the most, externalize the most, and have the most capacity for violence to take other things it's like built into the structure of fungible money in a way that the world would not be structured without money. Which I think it's just like fascinating. He riffs for an hour and talks about all of the second, third, and fourth order effects, which I find incredibly
send me that?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
He talks about the meta crisis, and he's like, this, you're going to solve climate change or the food system. It's, because your company can be as good if it's private as you are, but as soon as you bring on investors, it seems to kick into this system that Philip Morris and General Mills and all of these other companies are in.
It actually, I think it's a little like tighter than that from a definition standpoint. I don't actually think investors are the bad thing. I think the broader issue actually is that we basically have economic systems and corporations that hugely, and I don't have a solution for this, but these systems like hugely outlive the people that started them. And so I think that we actually have a huge crisis around like institutionalized in corporate America, where these companies, like we'll take a big food company. Almost every big food company was started before the year 1900, which means that there is no like Zuckerberg, Musk, Larry Page, Sergey Brin type person running any of these companies. They're like these zombie companies that are shareholder owned, and shareholders only give a fuck about profit. And I think that lack of accountability or running like the decision making of a company through some sort of human, emotional, moral compass.
Which is funny, the guys that you mentioned are notorious for being like quasi.
I mean, I think that founder-led companies come with huge downsides and huge upsides, just like people shit. You know what I mean? But I do think, though, if you look at the most toxic companies and institutions in the U.S., almost all of them are massive institutions run and governed by shareholders for the shareholders, with like no one person who is accountable or who can actually like even steer the ship.
Yeah, or like when it's your baby. I feel this is I've looked at selling, and I know what they will do if I sell. Like, they view it as parts. There's this much brand value, which can be converted to this much cash if we make this many products. And mine is like, but what are the products good? Will they benefit the people? Well, no, there's space for a product, so there needs to be a product here.
Yeah.
And I feel that, and I haven't gone through with it, but I was like, how can I contract this out so they can't do all these horrible things? And there's no way. There's no way, if that's the way that the water wants to flow from their profit maximizing perspective of why they would purchase the company in the first place.
Yeah.
So I felt that. I was like, what is my moral obligation? And it's not seriously on the table right now, but actually it is, to not sell, to not allow that to happen.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really tough, dude. I mean, I think that I basically think that a lot of this stuff just comes down to, are you working with or selling to or engaging with humans that have a strong conscience and a sense of like morality in a pro-human or religious way that they are running their decision-making frameworks through. And I do think that basically, do you have a human with a healthy conscience? And I think it's much harder to be I think that we are in a sick society, and like, you need people with healthy consciences. You need people with like healthy bodies, healthy spirit, healthy emotions. And I think that right now we just have a huge lack of people that you can point to that you would say like, that's like a healthy, good person. I mean, I don't care what you even think of like the two people that are going to run for president next year, but in no way am I like, man, these are like inspirational, America's best, face off against one another. It's like the opposite of the Super Bowl. It's like watching two toddlers shit on one another. It's like horrible, What do you have thoughts of, you've got the businesses that you have. Tell me about so you want to make people physically healthy or help them to be physically healthy by changing the friction that they have to like purchasing healthy things and making healthy decisions. Like what are the ways that you're thinking about this? Yeah, I basically think that today there's a type of person, and I used to be this person for sure, who looks at the average American or average Western person in a horrible food environment where they are alone, they're stressed out, they're like, exposed to more toxins, worse food, drinking more, all sorts of like drugs and shit like that. And I go, wow, that person is overweight. Like, how could they? What a failure of like willpower or whatever. And now I think that I believe that animals and, humans are just animals. We're a product of our environment. You go to the zoo and you take a wolf in the wild, and that thing is like healthy, vibrant, alive, and it's sort of a product of the environment. If the environment is in a drought or, it's the animal will reflect the environment it's in. You put a wolf in a zoo and it like starts losing its fur. It starts exhibiting weird tics. It starts biting itself. There's something called zoochosis, which is this mental disease, quote unquote, that happens when you put animals in a zoo that were, formerly in the wild. They go crazy. They start butting one another. Notably the orca in SeaWorld committed suicide by slamming its head against the side of the wall. Like, that's insane. And I basically think the same thing.
That's a very interesting idea to think. That's something when you said the wolf in the drought, I was like, it's going to look skinnier. Yeah. It's literally going to, like an alarm, reflect the state of its environment.
Completely.
Interesting.
And so I basically think that people today are unhealthy, and I think that is because they're in an unhealthy, like it is no longer the case that your environment is good and it outputs healthy people, and a sick, chronically.
What's going on with this guy?
Yeah, exactly.
An individual intervention for his own personality.
Like that's how we used to think, because obesity rate 20 years ago was not above 20% in any state. Now there's not a single state under a 20% obesity rate. Yeah, 20 years.
And it's so extreme that it's like it's undeniable.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so I think that as this has happened, the chronic disease and obesity crisis has happened, I think you just look around and you go, now being healthy is an exception, not the rule.
How could the environment
and
not
what
be
the fuck is going on? Totally. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. That's very interesting. The
I can't even remember the question. I just kind
of no. Something when you said drought, I got it. I got the I think I implicitly have some of what you have, and I think that's an important way to like self-develop, is to go, this is my total responsibility, and I can grab control of everything. And that, you know, that Republican style of like, you know, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps is very valuable to the individual. And when you have something as extreme as 50% of Americans being obese, which is just like skyrocketed in years, and when immigrants come, they snap right into it pretty freaking quickly. It's like you can run the numbers anyway and be like, this means that the environment is sick. And the other thing that is not questioned, which is weird, and I feel this around rich people, is like all these rich people addicted to drugs. And society's reaction is, how are you going to, like, you had to look a gift horse in the mouth and screw up that life? And it's, well, maybe if they're all addicted to drugs and miserable, there's something wrong with the environment which they came from, even though you can't conceive of how that could be the case.
Totally.
And the same thing is true if I'm looking around this room with all these lights and all this stuff, and I'm going, oh my God. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I basically think that that when health is the exception and not the norm, I think that, yes, it is true that you can take personal responsibilities for your health and be healthier. I think that is undoubtedly true. It's just hard. Mm-hmm. And like, I just don't believe that the country, I don't believe that everyone should be forced to take personal responsibility and go as deep as I have on health stuff in order to just remain as healthy as their grandfather was like 2 generations ago, mm-hmm. without even fucking thinking about it.
So we've talked specifically about obesity. Were people healthier then? Because I know that there was a lot other dangers that people had. They died of.
Of course, there were different dangers. Yeah. But like the thing that has happened in the last 70 years is like healthcare costs and deaths and everything have gone from a total flip. Like we basically built our healthcare system on the idea that people are healthy by default, and occasionally they get sick. They mm-hmm. break a bone, they like do something, you like get, you know, a sinus infection, and so you go to a sinus doctor that specializes in sinus stuff, mm-hmm. and they like have the world expert looking at you, they fix you, and you go home. But the rest of you is healthy. Yeah. Like we can fix the broken part, the core that is assumed to be healthy. The opposite is true today. Like we have that healthcare system, but applied to a world where almost 90% of all healthcare costs are related to chronic disease, i.e. like inflammation, obesity, cancer, like,
or even depression,
anxiety, all these things that affect the entire human organism, not just like their sinuses. Yeah. And so we have this, in my opinion, extremely outdated model of how do I treat someone? And so you come in and you go, oh, I'm inflamed. Like you could have crazy inflammation in your entire body.
Bro, I have huge inflammation in my leg right now. I've got a fat ankle for years. I need to get this thing looked at.
But yeah, like you would take that into.
I did. By the way, I went to my mom freaked out because she's a nurse, sent me to the ER. I waited there for a bunch of hours. They looked at my ankle and they said, you don't have a blood clot. That'll be $4,000. Yeah. And it was like, well, I'm never going to that again. That was terrible, and nothing positive came from it.
Completely. Yeah. But not only that,
and here it is, fat as hell.
but like not only even beyond that, it's what if like the symptom of whatever is going on is manifesting in your ankle.
Yes.
But it's starting somewhere else in the body.
Yes.
There is almost no place in the medical system today that will catch or dig into that, mm-hmm. which I think is crazy. No one is in charge of looking at Charlie like someone looks at an ankle attached to Charlie, to some patient X. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's crazy to me. And this is how we treat everything.
This came up earlier, and I think it's marginally connected. When I have stepped back and been like, what is my contribution to these massive problems? We talked about Daniel Schmachtenberger. They're huge and they are systemic and really, really bad. It seems like when I go, if I had to break down the root cause of the bad things that happen on planet, it is disconnection, which is to say, when a war starts, people don't start wars with people they love. They start wars with people with whom they're disconnected. When you are hungry, you do not begin to eat your left arm in order to feed your right arm because you are connected to that. And yeah, when you start treating the body as if it is a series of disconnected pieces, which can be isolated, that you're going, anytime you, and God, to look at all the connection would be so difficult. You got to look at the person and then their family and the place they come and where what they eat and the society that they live in, all to figure out why this ankle is inflamed. Yeah. But it does seem like that's how you find lasting solutions to things is to take higher orders of connection into account.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this applies to food stuff. I think it applies to health. I think it applies to community, all of this stuff. Like I basically think that for, I don't know, choose a number, 30 to 60 years, somewhere in that range, society has been trading, you're like, we talked a little bit about like Maslow's hierarchy. We've been consistently trading away, like we've been opting for cheaper food, more convenient friendships, larger house, like the things that are sort of at the base of Maslow's hierarchy, we have traded, like take living, for example, living in tight community, but in tight quarters in the same neighborhood with all people that like you're related to, or, in New York, like maybe an Italian neighborhood or whatever. Yeah. You trade that for a big house in the suburbs in Westchester. And it's very obvious why you should want the house in Westchester. It's bigger, more room, it's nice, like it has a yard, all these things. But it's incredibly non-obvious all the things that you're giving up on when you make that trade. And I basically think that we're in a position where we see the results of societally making, millions of individuals making those sorts of trades over and over and over again. And I think that we are just starting to figure out like what we lost when we traded what was obviously desirable for, or when we traded what like we had, which had a bunch of implicit, harder to understand benefits for the things that are obviously desirable, convenient, tastier, whatever it is.
It seems like I'm trying to think, because the concept of space is also critical. And I found in my life, I moved out to the big house separate, and the space has been incredibly valuable. There's a way to combine space with an individual such that it deepens connection, and a way to offer space to someone in a way that it cuts off connection. And I know that's like a weird, heady philosophical thing, but it seems
for sure
like, because the problem of the apartment building is like, and that I feel even when I come into the city of Austin, it's like, this is too much. Like I have to disconnect in order to function without this level of space. Like I need to get alone into nature where I can scream or yell or fucking move,
totally,
so that I can feel connected to someone that I'm sitting next to.
Honestly, probably the Italian neighborhood analogy is the bad one. I think the better analogy would be like a small rural village.
Sure.
Like the way that humans live for way longer than like the last 200 years in New York.
Tenement buildings.
Yeah, exactly. That's very bad analogy, and I'll own that.
Got it. That makes sense. So you're finding ways, and you've got the TrueMed now, which Zach explained to me. I was like, what's going on with that?
Oh, cool.
But to essentially make it easier for people to make healthy decisions and to reduce the environmental friction, is that a safe way to?
Yeah, basically. I mean, if you ask the average person, why are you not healthy? They would go either, I don't know how, or it's expensive, which are both true. Being healthy is hard, and it's also more expensive. So really hard to solve the being healthy is hard question. It's education, and there's much better people that are like trying to tackle that problem than me. I think though that financially, it is so true that it is expensive and hard to be healthy. So what we are doing is we basically started a company called TrueMed that health and wellness brands can work with, service providers, trainers, gyms, supplement providers, all of these.
Could I get like a cold plunge through this?
Yes.
So this is rad to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, and so basically like there's this type of account called a health savings account or a flexible spending account, HSA, FSA, that is tax-free money. Your employer often puts money into it, and you can actually spend these dollars on things that treat, alleviate, or prevent a disease.
And this is often like paired with health insurance in some sort of way?
Yeah, exactly.
So you'll have your like deductible, your this, and you'll have an HSA that enables you, like a Roth IRA, to put money in.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. And so there's like tens of millions of Americans have them. There's almost $150 billion.
Don't even use them.
And like 93% of it sits in cash.
Really?
Yeah. They're super underutilized. So HSA, FSA regs, and then I'll stop regulations. I'll stop talking about this in a sec. But HSA, FSA regulations were written at a time in the early 2000s when the average American was healthy. That is no longer the case. Like back then when it was written, the average American was not at risk of like turning out like the average American today that has 6 or more chronic diseases. At least one chronic disease, which is insane. And so what we're doing is we're basically taking this massive body of literature that shows food is medicine, supplements are medicine, exercise is better than any known SSRI or other treatment to treat depression. And we're saying that if you can use HSA, FSA funds to buy pills and prescriptions, you should be able to use these dollars to invest tax-free in your health by buying a cold plunge, a sauna, paying for a gym membership, Exactly. Buying supplements that keep you healthy.
Who are you saying that to? Do you have to like lobby for this, or is this?
No, this is totally legal today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's already legal, and you are setting up the infrastructure to make it easy for the cold plunge company.
It's already legal. We're making it easy.
Got it.
So we're working with like health and wellness brands. Like we just started working with Future Fit, which is like an online personal trainer thing. They basically now can tell their customers, hey, do you want to pay for our expensive fairly, because it's hard to like do something well that makes people healthy. But like, do you want to pay for our expensive services using a bucket of tax-free money? And if you have, you know, any like income that's on the mid to upper range of that, that is going to save you 20 or give you 20 to 45% greater purchasing power when you use these funds.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have to educate vendors of stuff and purchasers, because like
Yes.
there's probably a lot of people that have HSAs and FSAs that have no idea.
It's a huge lift.
Yeah.
It's a huge lift.
But it's so there. Like you said, there's $150 billion just waiting to be used. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't want to like go to the doctor, because it was like, and it's like, no, you can buy a cold plunge. You can buy like, there's an argument to be made that certain foods and supplements and all this kind of
100%.
stuff should be purchasable. And it's one of the most fun things to buy. I've been contemplating buying a cold plunge. And if you told me, yeah, you're going to get a tax-free savings on it, so like subtract whatever your effective tax rate is from this, that would absolutely push me over the edge.
100%, especially for high dollar purchases.
Yeah.
Like that.
And it's not even related to the exact dollar amount. It's just if I feel like it's being encouraged and I'm getting a deal, that's exciting to me.
Exactly. And so our whole goal with the company is we just want to make it possible and cheaper for the average person to invest in their health while they still have it, as opposed to just paying for surgeries, pills, and whatnot later in life when they're sick. That's the whole goal of the company.
If you can change public consciousness around that, which is obviously a huge thing, you got to do a lot more media. You got to do a lot more.
My co-founder is incredible at this.
Yeah,
he's been on Russell Brand. He's been on.
Okay,
like, he's done like the left and the right circuit.
Dope.
He's like really good at this.
Yeah,
thank goodness, because I'm not like personable enough to be like a figure on this, but he's excellent at it.
Yeah, because if people understood this, knew that they had that ability, a tremendous amount of this would just move right away, and it was easy and frictionless for them to get to whatever their cold plunge thing, because there is so much. Dr. Huberman's like the second biggest podcast. And there's a demand. Health is in right now. It's funny, when we were in like the Tim Ferriss health was very cutting edge, like start of the curve, and it's like fat part of the curve right now. It feels like,
and I think it's only going to get increasingly. People are only going to get interested in it more so. Yeah, like you have. I think that you know how like when you're going. This analogy may not make sense, but in some ways, like when you're trying to swim upstream, like the harder the current or the stronger the current, the harder you have to swim to like escape it. I think it's the same thing. Like when the default environment is so bad and making people so sick, I think there's just going to be more and more energy directed towards how do I escape this default environment that is going to make me sick, and like use my energy to create a system where like Justin or Charlie or whoever is actually healthy.
You sent me something that you were reading. What are you reading or learning these days? Because you always have interesting stuff.
What am I reading or learning? I've been going extremely deep. I'll say two things. I've been going extremely deep around this like environmental toxicants thing. I've been trying to work on like having hot takes and standing behind them with very little evidence to support them yet. But my hot take is that I think environmental toxicants, endocrine disrupting chemicals, phthalates, the class of chemicals called PFAS, are directly responsible for the massive like 50-ish% decline that we've seen in male testosterone in the last like 25 years. And I think that as an output is also playing some role in the massive amounts of like societal gender dysphoria and other stuff that we're seeing today. I just find it interesting that like at the same time as a lot of these issues are fairly, coming up, I think it's interesting that as people are like arguing about men, women, what does it mean to be a man or a woman? Biologically, men and women have never been more similar from a hormonal level. Interesting. So that's something I'm like interested in. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
The other thing that I'm quite interested in is this idea called like metabolic psychiatry, which is this guy, Dr. Chris Palmer, has written about. But it's effectively this idea that if you have if let's say you and a friend have bad diets, those bad diets or like exposure to toxins or whatever can manifest differently. We all know someone that like eats horribly, but is skinny, and then someone else like, eats horribly and they put on a ton of weight. But the skinny person might have cancer, they might have bad skin. Like there's any number of things where bad diet results in some sort of symptom. Chris Palmer has a hypothesis, which I completely agree with, which is that a lot of the mental anxiety, depression, ADHD, and other like mental disorders and diseases that we see on the rise today are your brain's, it's like your brain and your mind's symptom of metabolic dysfunction. So it is metabolic dysfunction manifested in a mental health disorder as opposed to like obesity or something else.
I take the same thought about ADHD, all of that stuff, personality disorders, and I put it on trauma. But I'm in broad agreement that these things that feel like such different classes are predictable patterned responses to a stimulus that we're not tracking correctly.
Completely.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful. Peace, everybody.